Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Wow. Am I excited for this episode today? Before I introduce you to our guest, here's a quote just for this episode. Always support your teammates by upholding the process, procedure, and values of the Guardian culture. Defend. D in Guardian. Our guest today, founder, Guardian Roofing and Siding, the first Guardian, and sure as heck not the last, the one and only Robert Frehafer, here to break down to us the nuances of being a Guardian, the philosophy, the behaviors, the insights, and hopefully you, our listeners, can draw from these sharings to be a better version of yourself, which I believe is highly likely. Thank you for coming back, Robert, and I'm excited to learn what you mean by defend. Always support your teammates by upholding the process, procedure, and values of the Guardian culture.
Good morning, Jay. Thank you. Thanks for having me back again on the Culture Matters podcast.
Pleasure's all yours.
You're in a rare. Sorry, I didn't hear you. What was the last thing you said?
I used to have. I have an old friend that every time he would meet somebody new, he'd be like, "Pleasure's all yours," and so, total character.
Well, I appreciate it. You're in a great mood this morning. I can hear it in your voice and in your word. And thanks for sharing this 6 o'clock hour with me.
I think it's the trainer at 4:45. I think it changes everything. And and I think it's a hopefully testimony to our audience that the power of accountability, the power of mentorship, the power of having people critique you and like push you beyond your limits. And I hope we go into some of that today. You know, even if it's not explicit, it's. I hope we can symbolize that some level to our audience. Just in this series we've been doing together with the values of Guardian, you know. So in the spirit of that, I have a question, but something tells me you have an answer.
I'm ready. What's the question?
Always support your teammates. Why? Why not stay on an island alone, head down, unswaying or unswayed in your convictions to sell, to close? I don't care what the company's up to. I don't care about other people on the team. I'm looking for the bag.
Yeah, why not, right? Just go after it and get it done. Yeah, so simple answer to that is I have found that and seen or experienced that a saying that also often comes up at church when we have a work day, right? Many hands, make light work, something along those lines. And that concept rings through as well, and especially when it ties in with the second half of upholding the processes, procedures, and values of the Guardian culture. It's in every different area of what goes on through the day. We could actually ruin. Like, it's like a paradox. We could ruin what we would actually want to go on by being selfish and independent, rather than, especially, what I've found and what I've been tempted with myself is to cut corners. If the motivation is, my sole focus is I want to sell I want to make the most. I want to be the most. I want to do the best. Well, in certain, my human nature, it brings me to a point where I may want to not uphold a process or a procedure or even compromise a value to get there, which in the in long term or even in a short term can be detrimental to a company's success. One thing that rises up very clearly in this is that, especially with the industry that I'm in, like, this is the nuances, right, that you spoke about, because you mentioned a few things to hopefully today talk about, the nuances, the philosophy and the behaviors. So in the nuances, right, our company does roofing and siding for residential homeowners. We specialize in going out after a hailstorm hits and inspecting a home and seeing if there's damage on there from the hailstorm, and then instructing the homeowner, some information so they could file a claim, questions to ask, things like that. Then we meet with the adjuster. So all that being said, the first part hinges on looking at the house. Is there damage? Would it make sense for the homeowner to call in a claim? And that one is so important. There's been plenty of companies that I've seen in the history that they've created damage. They're tempted and
Really?
create damage on the house. So if we're not, our process procedure, that would be in a direct violation of the guardian values, right? To do something along those lines, but it would be in alignment with, I want to sell the most, right? You would give yourself the most opportunity to sell if you were able to call the most claims in, meet the most adjusters, and then potentially sell the most jobs afterwards.
You bring something up to mind. I'm thinking, let's say someone that works with an organization does that one time, because people make mistakes. Yeah, because right, if the company isn't, if the company, I'm thinking, in the absence of truth, in the absence of a company talking about what it believes of let's say honesty, integrity, so on, they may be incentivized to do it again, because if they never get caught, they get paid. Like, that could have been the biggest month ever, their biggest week ever, their biggest day ever. And because of the economics of one mistake, they're incentivized and programmed subconsciously to do it again, do it again, do it again. It makes me think, a company that doesn't have conversation around what's right, what's wrong, is leaving it up to, it's like having your kids in the house raise themselves. In a sense, they're going to make mistakes if they raise themselves, but hopefully as a parent they make less mistakes because you can give them wisdom. I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, my first thought, I have a bunch of thoughts, but my first thought is that just like every one of these G, U, A, and R so far, it's rained into me, or my, you could say that it's my worldview that then it's impacting, is that the more we talk about these values, the more it's transparent for the need for me to, within my organization and externally as well, talk about these values. And that's I agree with what you're saying, from a standpoint, if it's a vacuum and there's nothing that's being spoken of, well, then there is really no culture. It's an individualized view, and there wouldn't even be any. The word is, we talked about this in our last episode, that the action, actually, the healthy is action precedes the word, the actions of the leader and the way that it's seen. So yeah, if somebody followed me around and I was ripping shingles off of every house that I went off, and they're like, yeah, this is how you do this, that would be taught behavior. If my word said, well, no matter what you do, never touch the roofing shingles, don't do anything. If you can inspect it from the ground and not even go on the roof before the adjuster gets there, that is some language that I use about, trying not to touch things, and having the homeowner see you when you're out there doing an inspection. They're literally your witness in case anything ever was brought up that you did do something. So all that being said, I agree that without the word and the action, that you would have a high probability that a salesperson, somebody that's in that role, could be motivated to do something like that. And the specifics of what you talked about, the behavior, was that if the salesperson one time was tempted, I do look at it that way, was tempted or had this concept, or, however it was that they did something that created damage to a roof that or siding, then it got paid for. And then it went through to contract, and they received, you said, highest sales numbers for the month, or they received income, or it was a change of life for them because they recognized, like, oh, this is what's going on, without the speaking about it. They put, and so many thoughts come to mind. So this is the one I don't want to miss, though, is that my past experiences in life, not in roofing, but in life, when there was temptation and things that I went after that felt good, or gave some relief, or whatever, I think of like drugs and alcohol, right? Like, but it's also stealing, lying, cheating, all these very poor behaviors, very unvirtuous behaviors that I found part of my process, and I do see it in society and culture, is that when we practice it once, it might be like uncomfortable, scary, exciting, but then the next time it becomes a little bit more comfortable. And the next time, and we become calloused to these sort of behaviors. So without the word, without talking about it and sharing, like, even the risk, right? Because that's where this D comes in, to defend by upholding our processes and procedures and the guardian values. That's the whole point of what I was saying, is that the whole company could be at risk, and from one action. It only takes one time. If somebody goes out and does something that is unscrupulous and does this, and that's the we go to court, we lose a license, we could be blackballed in the industry. Definitely the homeowners, and that the homeowners could hear about these type of things, the reviews would go on. Like, I just think that part of the opposite of D, which is defend, right? By defend our teammates by upholding our process, procedure, and guardian values. That goes back to your original question of, well, what about someone just wants to go out there and sell and not worry about anybody else and do anything? Unfortunately, that is how I view that somebody that was their main motivation was sole success. They have a higher probability, not that it's an absolute, but a higher probability of stepping outside of the processes, the procedures, and the guardian values to obtain that. Secondarily, the thought that comes into my mind with that concept, that nuance, the behavior, the philosophy, is that if the guardian, it's what we call the sales reps, if the guardian is out and they're on their own, well, now they're less within the discussion of what are the values, what are you doing, what are the processes, what are the procedures, because they're so hyper focused on self-success. Again, I do believe and have experienced a middle ground where there's autonomy in the individual sales rep, the guardian, that they can go out. But and this is something that you've taught a lot to me about, is that intentional meetings and intentional gatherings with purpose to share what are the values. Now, I've been able to do that. I talk about it in the last meetings, like, I don't verbally talk about the values enough, but I've been able to do that through, story very well, and sharing examples and testimonies and what goes on. So that's something that I'm gifted in. And so there's this middle ground where a sales rep or a guardian could be autonomous in what they do and go out there, but then the joining together with the written word, the spoken word, the action, the leadership, the intentional gatherings will then create this, that it will support the D in guardian, the defend.
Think of it in the inverse. Never support your teammates. Forget the process. there need not be a procedure. Your values trump the company values, or something, right? The inverse of that.
For me, it sounds like a nightmare, right? Like as the way that I view the company, and the care that I have for the individuals, the relationships that go on, it's like that would be like having like somebody like a running problem running rampant in the company. And that's a challenge for me. I don't like that. But when you say that, it surely does remind me of a time in a not so distant past within the company, surely, where there's this tolerance, let's say, right? Tolerance from leadership of people that would be stepping outside of it, or and I would say not only tolerance, I think based off of the unwritten values, based off of the uncommunicated values, as well as the poorly acted out values on my own part or leadership. That is what was going on in the company. I know you want to say something. I can see you jump one to, but that being said, so those unclarities, unalignment in myself is, in myself as leadership, created these uncomfortable feelings inside of me, like, and I wasn't even clear on what it was, but I just knew it didn't feel so good. But yet I would still accept certain behaviors, actions, attitudes outside of our processes and procedures. And that's where somebody that's strong in operations was able to hold a mirror up to me, because they were very frustrated. Like anybody in operations side, whether it was admin, mid-level or high level, they're like, what are you doing? Why are we accepting this? Until a point where it even gets to like, they don't even want to bring it up. And it's just like unspoken conflict where I'm even aware of it. So those were some poor examples. So when I say like, oh, it sounds like a nightmare, like those were some experiences I've had, as well as it's what I see from an outside. And I'm not saying all roofing and storm damage, companies, but I see it in some companies from an outside, and they implode over in a short amount of time, because whatever goes on, you hear these stories about this rep did this, or somebody else did this, or the owner did this, and then they're gone, and then they start back up again. So there is that model is out there that you talked about originally. Why not just go gather as much as you can, leave whatever wreckage behind? But for me, the why not comes down to there's just something inside, right? There's something inside. I like to give I attribute it to, God, the Holy Spirit, the way that he's impacted me, and being obedient to these values, biblical values, has definitely been a positive impact. So I want to continue on down that path and listen to that intuition or still small voice when I hear like, hey, that's not the right way, that's not the right thing. Challenging with that is that not everything's so black and white. So what did you want to say? I know you wanted to say something in there. Go ahead.
Here's
please.
My inverse rendition. Never support your teammates. Forget the process. There are no procedures. Your values trump the company. Follow your truth. And then I thought, oh, dang, we got to do a podcast episode where we do the inverse of each of the values. Just be a fun experiment. I got that from Munger. Invert, always invert. When Charlie Munger was assigned in the military, in the Air Force I believe it was the Air Force or the Navy, I think it was the Air Force, to make sure planes didn't crash. First, he tried to figure out how would I want to crash them if I was the enemy. So that's what comes to mind. Imagine and then I thought about what you said about the industry. In the absence of leaders like yourself taking on the burden of becoming clear on the values and working on the processes, the procedures, and putting in that extra time to have meetings and to plan in the future, how could the company be any different in a business or in an industry where it's reacting to storms? So I'm thinking, if I'm going to travel to 50 states over a year or 10 states over a year, and I'm in the industry of the repairing of the roofing and siding based on storms, which are reactive, culture is kind of like an oxymoron because I'm going city to city or state to state. I don't have relationships with these strangers. And if I don't love my neighbor, well, then I'm steal from my neighbor. Those are some things that come to mind. It's like the industry itself is reacting to external conflicts, unknowable, uncertain, attracting people that lack accountability in the sense that the bar isn't set super high. Like I've got to become, a doctorate in neurosurgery. So it's attracting people that would benefit from some level of accountability. And so that's what you're providing with this, with being a steward of your values and taking that extra time to work on creating a business where people can be directed into the right way. So yeah, like reading this value in the inverse is kind of eye-opening.
Yeah, when you talk about Munger and his way that he would, if he was the enemy, how would he try to bring the plane down? I don't know if it's based off of the way that I was raised, grew up, and I don't even want to say the way I was raised like that, because that really puts all the onus on my parents or family. Just the exposure to the world as a young human, or if it's just something in the way that I'm wired. But for some odd reason, as I say it probably comes down to hurt and pain, like me being hurt, as well as me. I don't know why I often look into the why of things, but to really to drill this down, my point is that for some reason, the way that I'm wired, I think often of the worst case scenario. And I think of how would someone, and now this is the other thing that came to my mind of the why. Maybe because I've been the scammer, I've been the schemer, I've been the one that would take the shortcut, do the least amount of work for the most amount of reward, or steal or manipulate. Through my life, I've been a practicer of that sort of communication or activity, which I'm not saying that sitting here proudly, right? That those are tough things to say, but this is what my walk had been. And so that being said, I have this uncanny ability to look at everything that we do from a business standpoint, process, procedure, and then look at it from the inverse, like, okay, how would somebody take advantage of this? How would someone manipulate this system? How would somebody be drawn to shortcut the process, cheat, steal, etc.? And then it's been helpful to create accountability balances, I call it checks and balances. Now, I think that, my experience has been in the first 10 years of business, that has come off. I wasn't even probably clear on what I was doing. I was just thinking, all right, that's how business goes, and this is how you navigate things. Since working with you, and I could say almost 5 years now, since 2018, the understanding of my own insecurities, my own fears, how I act in that, or how that impacts my actions, has definitely helped me to communicate these type of scenarios in a more balanced way, less emotional, fearful. I don't want to say less, like I don't have any emotions, but less externally reactive and hurtful. And so I've been able to look at situations from the inverse, like you're talking about with Charlie Munger, and put checks and balances in place, even at the risk of sounding crazy, right? Like for years, like I'll just give one example of what I'm talking about. Like for years, I would always not want too much money in the bank because I would be concerned. Like, we got a ton of people that have our bank accounts. Accidents can happen. People can, the teller, like sometimes I remember walking out of the bank and telling my wife, like, I don't like what just happened in the bank. I want to move all the money because of the way the interaction with the teller. I remember it like it was yesterday. The teller, I had to write down my social security number or something to get into the thing. And the little piece of paper that she wrote it on, she like crumpled it up quickly and slid it into her pocket. And we had a couple dollars in the bank at the time, right? Like, I was not comfortable with that. That prompted me to make sure that I had these freezes on my Equifax report, and so somebody couldn't even pull a credit. And it prompted me to switch my bank account stuff for the time. And but there's just some level now. It's hard for me to tell the difference. What's intuition and what's just fear-based concept. So all that being said, I'm glad to hear that somebody that you hold in such high regard, like Charlie Munger, and that obviously has created value in the world, often uses this practice, because it's something that I've actually, through our working together, I kind of like, I've almost shamed it a little bit, like, oh, like I'm being overreactive. It's my own crap. But I do believe, and I still practice it. I think there's a need for it. And the reason that I'm talking about it so much is because we're talking about the inverse, right? We're talking about the opposite of the values. Well, if I'm also a leader, I'm in charge. I need to make sure that not only are we teaching what's positive, but that then I can reveal or protect. I'm defending the teammates by, upholding our processes, procedure, and the guardian values as the leader, and looking out for the team, that everybody is doing the things that they're doing. So it's not, and educating people like, hey, if you get tempted to do this, just know you're more than likely recorded. Somebody's probably, and especially if clients are coming to you, like I tell all the time, like people will say like, oh, will you pay my deductible? No. Well, so-and-so said they'll pay. I'm not that guy. I tell everybody, act as if you're in the house and you're on like, nightly news, and they're going to pop out with a camera and say, did you just say you'll pay their deductible? Like, whatever these things are. So I do share some of those areas where somebody could be even unaware, right? Because not everybody that comes into the company, especially nowadays, has been steeped in this poor, characteristic world that I am. We actually are, I thank God we're attracting, people that haven't been through all that chaos, and they still, anyway. So we're attracting people that haven't been, they're not coming like from chaotic in like drugs, alcohol, broken homes. They're not coming from all
You
that.
found that you're actually attracting employees that are of a higher consciousness.
So it's hard to say consciousness, because of the fact that even when I was saying like, well, they don't come from like jails and rehab and this, because the way that I'm seeing is that a lot of people are still walking around hurt, and they're walking around with these challenges. It just may be a different set of them, where they may not be exposed to the griminess of the world, the truly deep-seated lies, manipulations, stealing, thefts, for this, and the ability to pull from those experiences. So
your values have helped people that are climb out of purgatory, as well as those that are in another version of it, less clear to the culture, meaning someone could be not yet have a purpose in life. They haven't done drugs or been incarcerated, but they're looking for somewhere for meaning, and you've found that you've been providing that to them.
I have a little, I would classify just from the, like we talk about, like, okay, is the people that are being attracted, are they, different higher level consciousness, just to try to shed a light of the way that I'm viewing this. through,
Conscious may not be the right word. I don't think
yeah,
that's
but what I'm saying is through life, in this same vein that we're talking about, I found that people that have been through the depths of despair, of drugs, jails, institutions, things of this nature, like these horrible things that are layered with tons of guilt, it's actually more aware. They're actually more self-aware of the challenges that they've been through. So then they have a higher probability for some extreme change to get to point B, right? Like versus point B being an awareness of God, who they are in this world, that they're sinners and they're separated from God, and they're, that, and to actually look at themselves and then be able to cry out to God, like, please save me, and be able to have faith in Jesus, and repent and go that direction, versus someone that may not have experienced such low lows or depravity and degradation. They actually, my concern, and this has been a philosophy of mine for a while, is that they miss the boat. They don't even know that. And potentially they could be in that consciousness of a lower consciousness of their reality in a spiritual worldview. Like, yeah, everything's good. That wasn't my story. I didn't do all these things. Like, things are just okay. And be on this okay road to hell, through this, middle of the road life experience. So I talk about that a little bit because just seems like where we got to, where
yeah.
maybe.
I wrote this down. If you haven't been to hell, heaven is less alluring. Here's a quote that I think sums up this portion of Defend. God creates out of nothing. Wonderful, you say. Yes, to be sure, but he does what is still more wonderful. He makes saints out of sinners. Soren Kierkegaard.
So just to hear that, I believe you just said that to me the other day, and that didn't hit me even in the same way as it is right now. But just to think about that, what he's saying is, God made everything that we see right now out of nothing. Like, as you look as far as you can out into the universe and the stars and galaxies and all those type of things, and if you look down as small as you can with whatever electronic microscope to get to the detailed level of what is the building blocks of life, all of that he made from nothing, right? If from that view, if you view it that way. But then the second half of that, it says more. So if you look at that, like, okay, this being made this from nothing. So that's impressive, right? For lack of a better word, that is overwhelming. It's magnificent. It's wonderful. It's we should, when I slow down enough, I'm in awe of that, of what God has created and how the inner workings of it and all that. But what's he say? What's more like
What
impressive,
is still more wonderful.
wonderful, like full of wonder. What is still more wonderful is that he turns a sinner.
He makes saints out of sinners.
He makes saints out of sinners. So, my understanding and definition of a saint is something that it's a short for the word sanctified. Sanctified is something that's put apart, separated for good works. So he can turn us humans into something that's set apart as sinners for his good works. And it's a feat that we may never truly understand. I may never truly understand it this side of heaven. It's something that even from the way it was done doesn't even fully make sense to me, right? The way to make these saints out of sinners was through death, through the cross, through what Jesus did and the faith in him, and then through our repentance. So it's if so basically what the link in my mind when I hear that is like, okay, if what this creation is so amazing, And literally, even as we're having this talk, I'm looking out the window, the sky, the sun's coming up. It's like blazing like cotton candy, pink and blue and awesome looking, right? Like, so if he can do that, he may be shedding light. Like, something that's more wonderful than that is he's turning us from a saint, or from a to a saint, from a sinner. So yeah, that's a great quote. Thanks for sharing some Kierkegaard today.
What does any of this have to do with roofing and siding?
You know, in business, right? You go to these like conventions and all this stuff, and they say, "What's your why?" Right? Why do you do this? What do you think? And they say things along the lines of like, "It doesn't matter what you do. I could be an insurance salesman. I could be a car salesman. I could sell jets. I could sell roofing." So, could that be it? Could it just be that this was the widget that landed on my lap because of my upbringing, where I was and how it went? So, but I don't. So, what does this have to do? Everything, right? Like, so if it was insurance or it was jet sales, these values are going to have everything to do with that thing. They are totally entwined, and that is the value that I see is in the authenticity of what you do and the virtues of what you do, and it will latch on, and it will reveal itself in every word you write, every action you have, and everything you say. It will have everything to do with it, right? That's a longer answer I could go into, like, okay, well, how does it apply? What are the nuances, the behaviors, and the philosophies that affect and impact roofing through all of these things? And if I had to answer it in a behavioral standpoint, if we can be, really, Jay, so it's really great, but it goes back to the values, right? Like, even as you look at the first one, which is a guardian is a home improvement specialist who listens intentionally, communicates clearly, and educates the customer by telling the truth. That's like a foundation, right? Like, you have to listen, you have to talk, you have to be truthful. So many of these things that, again, this all-encompassing being that I have, and which is turning into a living, breathing culture and impacting other people. It stems from, even the principles of a 12-step program: being honest, open-minded, and willing. Right? We just talked about the D. I mean, the R. Right? Is the so somebody can go back to that one and listen to it to hear about it. So, all that being said, I know that we're getting wrapped up on time. It has everything to do with roofing and siding and the way we live our lives, help the homeowner, help ourselves, and support, and like we talk about in D, that we support our teammates by upholding the principles, the processes, and the values of the Guardian culture.